He has been an amazing experience for all of us who've had the privilege to touch him in some way. Seeing Ghost, Cremello, and so many other members of that herd at the BLM was really tough. I mean, they barely resembled the photos I had seen of them in their days in the wild. They looked defeated. I was trying to imagine what that loss must feel like for them. And I wondered if they would ever find any joy at all in our domestic world. And that's our mission, is to restore some of the joy, hopefully all of the joy they lost when they were rounded up and lost their freedom. I just kept thinking how none of them would ever see their world again. None of their mares, none of their babies, basically lost to them forever. Ghost's chance for a happy life was going to be in our hands, and I honestly felt such a heavy weight because of it. I remember the morning he arrived at Sweetbeau. It was barely dawn when the hauler backed up to that pen and the transport opened the door. And he just stood there with his head down, and I was sick when he turned towards me and I saw his beautiful white blaze was streaked with blood. He looked out into the early morning light and took a moment to collect himself, and then he just stepped out into what I was hoping a newer, happier world. I had no idea at that moment how we would possibly find a way to change his heart after all he'd experienced in that human world. He trotted over to his food and clean water, and he seemed to settle in a little bit. I didn't know what to think, but I was trying to figure out what he might become in this world. Was this stallion, who was famous for stirring up trouble in both herds out on the plain, going to ever find his way in a domestic world? I made the same promise to him that I make to every horse that comes to Sweetbeau, and that is that he would never again be threatened with harm. I knew we would give him nothing but our very best, and I only hoped he would do the same. So in those few weeks, he was tired and he was weary. He seemed shut down and trying to make sense of his life. And in those weeks to follow, he was still withdrawn. He could tell he was skeptical. He almost seemed indignant. Well, we let him have all of that, and we gently coaxed him to trust us. And in a few more weeks, I finally got that first touch from his soft nose. And that curious nose created a bond. It's such an amazing, glorious feeling, and it never goes away. The actual trainer we assigned to him was a young lady named Sydney, and she had never haltered a wild horse, much less a Mustang. But Sydney had a very soft and patient manner, and she was rewarded with the opportunity of earning Ghost's trust, because of course he's a very special boy. She didn't disappoint, because several weeks later she slipped his halter on and his tag off very ceremoniously, without any drama or trauma. Sydney went on to do some really great things with Ghost and with the younger Onaqis that came to us at the same time. At Sweetbeau, we know for sure that there is no way to shortcut a great foundation on a horse, and Ghost had one. We take the time to be meticulous with every single one of them, and our reward is that even Ghost, in his own time and by his own choice, has allowed so many people into his life. It is always a very teary, emotional moment when photographers who captured him in the wild, in his element, come to meet him at the ranch and finally get to lay their hands on him. What a beautiful creature. What a magnificent representation of the Great West to be that wild Mustang. Here at the ranch, he has shown us how smart and capable he actually is. He, I think, has decided that because we listen to him, we are worthy of his communication. So he actually makes an effort to teach us to speak his language too. He has trained us as much as we've trained him. He has taught us so much about the way those horses think and what they'll accept. He doesn't flinch at hard work. He strolls through the obstacle course of his own speed, and sometimes he'll race around the arena with the other Onaqui brothers in his draft. He is quite a sight to see. He effortlessly floats along with his neck arched and tail in the air, and there it is, joy. Joy in our domestic world. So we have had Ghost almost 2 years now, and people ask us what will be next for him, what's going to happen to him long term. Well, everyone knows we train Mustangs to adopt them out to forever homes, and that way we can bring home more and more horses after every roundup, and hopefully give them better homes as well and opportunities. Ghost is a little bit different.
This is Ghost. He's coming 7. He is a gelding from the Onaqui herd. He absolutely lived up to his reputation from the wild. He's been one of the most challenging and rewarding horses I've ever worked with. He's extremely self-confident, which is both a blessing and a curse when you're working with a horse, because he's extremely brave and just like so prideful. He carries himself beautifully, but it took a very long time to convince him that people are something that he wants to work with and not against. He's always going to have a special place in my heart. Smile!
Ghost is in the hearts of everyone who has seen him in his magnificence, outrunning free and wild. He's become a symbol of how glorious these Mustangs are in the wild and how amazing they can also be in our domestic world. We think that he's meant to remain an ambassador of the wild Mustangs, and so we plan to keep him as such. He'll have his forever home with Sweetbeau horses. Ghost is meant to be the face of that wild Mustang that's going to inspire others to become advocates for protecting our wild Mustangs. The horses should remain wild, but if they can't, let's do everything we can to give them joy and happiness in this domestic world. It's all we can do. Ghost the Mustang was wild. He's now living in the domestic world. But the truth is, Ghost, he'll never belong to anyone but himself. And we like it that way.
I will try my best to comfort you every day, to heal the hurt you felt when you were taken away. Promise to listen when you say it's too much. Wait patiently by until you accept my touch. And when you trust that my promises have all been